And a good evening to everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live. I hope that you're enjoying your Wednesday night. We have got a special show, as this is the week of the Georgia-Alabama game, which, in my opinion, living on the border of Georgia and Alabama, this has been the biggest rivalry in college football in the last 7 years. And it goes back to them competing for national championships, SEC championships. And if you really want to take it all the way back to 2008, when Nick Saban first played Georgia, and this basically, the show is, I'm going to actually go through all the matchups. I'm going to break down all the matchups since 2008 between Georgia and Alabama, because it is must-watch TV, edge of your seat. Every single game is like a heavyweight bout, because these two teams have been the standard in college football for a decade. They play this Saturday night. Number 2, Georgia. Number 4, Alabama. Georgia is favored by 1.5. But there are some key factors. Tate Ratledge might be out with the injury. Michael Williams is still hobbling. I don't know if he is going to play. The thing about this game, I saw this game last year in the SEC championship. I had to rewatch the SEC championship because I felt that Georgia was the better team. It's just that Alabama got the breaks, and there was really no stopping Jalen Milroe with the ball in his hands. He was going to take over the game, and that is what he did. And Georgia misses out on a three-peat. Georgia looks at this game a lot different than when it was on the schedule last year when Nick Saban was the coach. Now it's Kalen DeBoer. I think that Georgia and Alabama definitely have a lot to prove, and it's going to really shake up the landscape of the college football, even though both teams are college football playoff teams, in my opinion. So the game itself, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? And are these teams on a collision course to meet in the SEC championship? Well, Texas has got something to say about that, and possibly Tennessee. All right, let's go ahead and take it all the way back to 2008. Now, remember, Kirby Smart was the defensive coordinator back then, and the coach for Georgia was Mark Richt. I remember 2008 because Georgia was a preseason number 1. And because they had close wins against Arizona State, they went all the way down to they went all the way down to 3, even though they were still undefeated. You know, they weren't winning convincingly. Remember, they had Matthew Stafford, they had Noshawn Moreno. This was a team the year before just thumped Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl and really should have been playing in the BCS national championship, because I'm completely convinced that a team that was ranked 4th, and you have West Virginia and Missouri both lose, that common sense would tell you that Ohio State, number 3, Georgia, number 4, would be 1-2. But for some strange reason, LSU, that was already down to number 7, went from 7 to 1. And I could never understand that. But I'm not here to talk about the past. Actually, I kind of am, because I'm here to talk about 2008. Georgia going up against Alabama. This was Nick Saban's second season. College game day was there. Georgia had a blackout. They were wearing the black uniforms, and it was over. Alabama, in fact, went up 31-0 at the half. And I think that this game was impactful, not just because Alabama would go on to play Florida in the SEC championship. They would lose to Utah in the Sugar Bowl. But it skyrocketed Alabama's program, and Georgia kind of became like a 10-win team. I mean, they were mediocre since then until Kirby Smart takes over in 2016. But this game was so important because it flipped the fortune of both programs going the opposite way. It catapulted Alabama to stardom for an entire decade, and they would eventually win 6 national championships. And Georgia was okay. They were about a 10-win team, and well, don't get me started on 2010. They went 6-7. I mean, but they were, kind of a middle of the pack. But Mark Richt got Georgia back to where they needed to go. They had a problem with running backs. 2009, Joe Cox was on that team. They win 8-5. They did beat Texas A&M in that bowl game, but they lose to Central Florida in the Liberty Bowl in 2010. That was Aaron Murray's first year. They did not have a running back. I mean, say what you want. Caleb Keene, Wayshaw, and Ely, there was really no running back there. It wasn't until 2011. This was the year they started 0-2. I mean, they lose to Clemson and they lose to Boise State, and Mark Richt is all of a sudden on the hot seat. But a young freshman running back by the name of Isaiah Crowell might have saved their season as they go on and they play LSU in the SEC championship. And they also ended up losing to LSU, and they also lost to Michigan State. But they still made it to a New Year's Day bowl game, and they won double-digit wins. So they got Aaron Murray coming back. They've got all this momentum. Unfortunately, Isaiah Crowell leaves and goes to Alabama State, but they got Todd Gurley, they got Keith Marshall, and they've got some weapons. I feel that the 2012 team was poised to win a national championship. This game was so hyped because you had number 2 Alabama and number 3 Georgia going head to head, and Notre Dame was the number 1 team in the country that year. We knew that the winner of this game was going to win the national championship. I got some notes on this game because this is a game I also rewatched. All right. So Georgia's up 14-10. Alabama's getting ready to attempt a field goal. Would have made it 14-13. And Alec Ogletree, the field goal block, the running it back, and Georgia leads Alabama 21-10. If you're a Georgia fan, you're thinking, wow, we're going to win this game. Not so fast. You know what Alabama did? They ran the football down Georgia's throats with Eddie Lacy and TJ Yeldon. They rushed for over 250 yards, and the next 2 drives, they get a touchdown with a 2-point conversion. They're down 21-18. They get the ball back. They score again. They're up 25-21. But then Todd Gurley gets a touchdown. Georgia's up 28-25. Georgia gets the ball back, up by 3. And on a 3rd and 1, Todd Gurley gets stuffed at the line. And Georgia was cramming the box. A.J. McCarron really was just doing bubble screens. I mean, he was giving it to T.J. Yeldon, Eddie Lacy. Georgia found a way to stop T.J. Yeldon and Eddie Lacy in that 4th quarter. But then A.J. McCarron made the pass that got Alabama fans all excited. It was a great moment in Alabama history. The 45-yard touchdown pass to Amari Cooper, which really sunk the hearts of Georgia fans. But there was still time left on the clock. Aaron Murray drove all the way down to the 5-yard line. Georgia, even though they're down by 4, they got to score a touchdown. They're driving. That pass to Arthur Lynch, you're going hurry up. You don't need to you got to rush things. CJ Mosley made the play of the game. Oh, it still hurts to this day. He tips the ball, and the receiver for Georgia, didn't even think about you're a receiver, you're caught in the moment, you catch the ball, but they had no more timeouts, and the game's over. Alabama would go on to win, and they would go on to throttle Notre Dame in the national championship to win back-to-back national championships, 3 national championships in 4 years. Heartbreaking if you're a Georgia fan. And the thought of, Georgia's going to be back. Don't worry. We're going to be back. Yeah, well, about that. 2015. This game was in Athens. It was just rainy, terrible conditions. Alabama the previous week lost to Ole Miss. Alabama's not losing 2 games in a row. Georgia was favored in this game. But that was bulletin board material for Nick Saban and the Alabama team, which, by the way, that 2015 Alabama team might have been the greatest coaching ensemble ever created. And, of course, they had Derrick Henry that won the Heisman. And they would eventually go on to win the national championship. I honestly feel Georgia losing to Alabama 38-10 in Athens in 2015 is probably the reason why Mark Richt got fired, because Georgia feels they're on the same level as Alabama and they just can't quite get over the hump. They need to get a Saban disciple to come in to resurrect this program to eventually be Alabama one day. And so this was Mark Richt's last season. In comes Kirby Smart. Now, he didn't have the greatest first year. 2016 was rough, but he did, finish 8-5, and they did have a bowl win, and everything was good. But then they ended up, getting a quarterback, but that was Jacob Eason's first year, by the way. I mean, I actually thought Georgia got their quarterback. They finally got a very good NFL-ready quarterback to go toe-to-toe with Alabama. The 2017 season, Jacob Eason gets hurt. In comes an unknown 4-star quarterback out of Howson County that happened to play in the Little League World Series back in 2007, Jake Fromm, who became a sensation overnight, especially in that Notre Dame game in South Bend. I mean, that catch by Callaway's own Terry Godwin was just absolutely incredible. Georgia having a very special year. They did get blown out by Auburn in that regular season, but they were able to bounce back. Auburn ended up beating Alabama in the Iron Bowl to play Georgia in the SEC championship. Kerryon Johnson was injured in that game, by the way. I don't know what the outcome would have been if Kerryon Johnson actually was healthy, but Georgia wins the SEC championship. First time since 2005. Great moment for Georgia. They get the number 1. They get the number 3 seed. Alabama was the 4 seed because they ended up playing Clemson, that Kelly Bryant-led team, which led to the national championship. Georgia and Alabama. First of all, for Georgia to get to this point, they ended up beating Oklahoma in a classic Rose Bowl. Sony Michel with that overtime touchdown. Nick Chubb was running the ball great. Jake Fromm had receivers. He had tight ends. He had running backs. Georgia looked like they were ready to win a national championship. And they had a great game plan against Alabama in that first half, shutting down Jalen Hurts. And that defense suffocated Alabama's offense. And so Nick Saban made a very unpopular decision at the time. He decided to put in an unproven freshman quarterback by the name of Tua Tagovailoa. And Alabama fans know about this because it will forever live in the back of their minds as one of the greatest moments in Alabama history. The 2nd and 26. I'm sorry, Georgia fans. I'm sorry I had to bring it up. Georgia was up 20-7 in this game. I think that when Jake Fromm threw the ball and it went off the helmet of the Georgia player and Raekwon Davis ended up intercepting it, I think that really changed the fortune and it flipped the momentum to Alabama. And Georgia just could not close out this game. They were up and they had opportunities to pull away and win a national championship. And Alabama had a chance to win it in regulation. A chip shot field goal was missed. They go to overtime. And in that overtime game, Georgia's Rodrigo Blankenship ends up making this incredible 50-yard field goal. And then Georgia ends up sacking Tua on that 2nd and 26. I don't know why. I don't know what he was thinking. Like, he probably knew that there was blown coverage. But to Devonta Smith, who was a freshman, by the way, freshmen really stepped up in this national championship. Devonta Smith with the touchdown pass from Tua on the 2nd and 26, heartbreaking loss for the Georgia Bulldogs. And yet another national championship for the Alabama Crimson Tide. If you're a Georgia fan, you're thinking, when are we ever going to get back? Let's go to the SEC championship. Georgia had a 28-14 lead in this game, by the way. I just wanted to throw that out there. Jake Fromm's the quarterback. Jake Fromm looked incredible in that first half. Now, Georgia doesn't have Sony Michel or Nick Chubb anymore. They're at the NFL. But they've got, I don't know, Elijah Holyfield, the son of the heavyweight champ, Evander Holyfield, and DeAndre Swift. Still got a great team. Georgia playing Alabama in the 2018 SEC Championship, 28-14. The long pass to the tight end to get him into field goal range. I'm thinking, once again, it's over. Tua's the quarterback for Alabama. I mean, he was hobbling. Georgia had a great game plan against Tua. And then Rodrigo Blankenship ends up missing the field goal because the field goal would have put Georgia up 31-14. And then in comes Jalen Hurts. And, well, by the way, Tua did still play in the game. Alabama did get a touchdown to cut it to a touchdown, but then Georgia ended up giving it back to Alabama. And Jalen Hurts doing his thing, became Superman. He ended up putting on the cape, and Alabama ends up taking the lead. Georgia's got the ball. We all know about the fake punt, Justin Fields. I don't know what Kirby Smart was thinking on that. Georgia ends up losing the SEC championship. And here's the narrative. And back in 2018, I wasn't really covering sports. I really wish I was, because there was a lot of great sports stories during this time. If I had a podcast, I would go into detail about all the games. Georgia was so close to beating Alabama in the national championship and so close in that SEC championship and should have won. This is the narrative now. Why can't Georgia, who's had a double-digit lead the last 3 times in a postseason game they've played Alabama, why can't they close out the game and beat Alabama? All right, let's fast forward to 2020, the COVID year. Alabama clearly was the best team in college football. I mean, they had Mac Jones. If you look at the receivers they've had, like Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. I mean, they pretty much had 4 NFL wide receivers. And you look at Stetson Bennett. He ended up throwing 3 interceptions in this game. Georgia actually did have the lead, and Alabama ended up getting that score right before the half to kind of cut it close. But the Stetson Bennett 3 interceptions were killer. Georgia would end up making the quarterback change to JT Daniels. And I just don't know how. I thought that maybe Georgia would just stick with JT Daniels. But JT Daniels ended up getting hurt the following year. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and talk about the SEC championship first, because Georgia was ranked number 1 that year. They probably had one of the best defenses of all time. This was a historic defense with guys like Jordan Davis. You had Jalen Carter. You had Nakobe Dean. You had pretty much the Philadelphia Eagles on this defense. I mean, let's just be honest here. It was the Philadelphia Eagles that we know of today. Great historic defense. But once again, Stetson Bennett throws 2 interceptions, including a pick 6 to Jordan Battle, which sealed the game. I mean, Georgia was down 31-14, and Jordan Battle with that pick 6 just was a killer. And just a terrible, terrible loss for Georgia. But because Georgia was undefeated and they had a great season, they still got to go to the college football playoff, where they would end up taking on Michigan. And so they ended up throttling Michigan in the Orange Bowl in the semifinal, which would set up for a rematch once again with the Alabama Crimson Tide in the national championship. How you like that, Georgia fans? You like that graphic? Because Georgia did win the national championship, but I'm here to tell you it wasn't easy. This was a 9-6 game. It was back and forth. Stetson Bennett threw a long pass to George Pickens that got him into field goal range. Georgia did block a field goal. You had A.D. Mitchell, a huge touchdown pass. Brock Bowers with the touchdown pass that sealed the deal. And Alabama was down 26-18. And watching this national championship and seeing Bryce Young with the ball, I'm thinking, oh, he's at least going to tie it. Bryce Young underthrows the ball. And the name Keely Ringo, who, by the way, is a member of the Philadelphia Eagles, he intercepts the ball, runs it back. That moment right there, the Georgia Bulldogs knew that they won the national championship for the first time since 1980. It was a great feeling. Finally, they got over the hump. They beat Alabama. A lot of question marks in this game. Alabama fans will say, well, if Jameson Williamson didn't get hurt, then maybe Alabama would have won again. Well, hindsight's 2020, my friend. The Georgia Bulldogs, national champions. And by the way, the following year, they didn't play Alabama again because LSU ended up beating Alabama. Alabama ended up having 2 losses of both one-possession games, and they were both to Tennessee and LSU. They miss out on playing in the SEC championship with that rematch with Georgia. Who knows what would have happened if it was Georgia and Alabama again. But Georgia ends up winning back-to-back national championships. And then, well, going to have to go to last year, SEC championship. I talked a little bit about it in the beginning of the show. Alabama ends up beating Georgia 27-24. Now, I'm eating crow because last year I got on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live show and I said that I could see a scenario where Alabama goes 6-6. I said that after the South Florida game because that was not the Alabama that I'm used to seeing. But Jalen Milroe proved me wrong. He put that team on his back, and he was able to beat Georgia in the SEC championship. It knocked Georgia out of the college football playoff. Alabama sneaks into the college football playoff because the voters didn't want to put Florida State because they knew they weren't the same team without Jordan Travis. So Alabama ends up playing Michigan in the college football playoff. And what do you know? The Michigan Wolverines ended up winning that game. And now here we are. A regular season matchup between Georgia and Alabama. I mean, it's going to be the biggest college football game until Georgia plays Texas. I'm just being funny. Anyway, this game is huge on both sides because I know both fan bases. Living in Columbus, Georgia, you got 2 passionate fan bases, Georgia and Alabama. You also have Auburn fans who, if you're a true Auburn fan, you hate both teams. So I don't know who Auburn's going to root for in this game, but it should be a lot of fun. I had fun actually breaking down all the matchups, 9 total matchups since Nick Saban took over back in 2027. Yeah, see, there you go, 2008. That's when it all started. And now Nick Saban is in the broadcast booth, and I'm very interested to see this matchup between Kirby Smart and Kalen DeBoer. Kirby Smart has something to prove. Now that Nick Saban is retired, Kirby has just a case to state that Georgia is now the new Alabama. But I would not go too far into that because, Georgia still has to win 6 national titles. So to get to Alabama's level, I don't think Nick Saban's, legacy will ever be duplicated. All right, this has been fun. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night. Don't forget to catch my scoreboard show on Georgia Alabama Sports Life's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Have a good night, everybody.